Our opening words this morning are by Judith Mannheim, and in her ending words, she quotes Lao Tzu. We gather together in this space to honor and understand our lives. We bring our pasts and would share them, our dreams and would express them. We use words, song, silence, and gesture. Words cannot define our lives, but they enable us to reach out to each other, to tell and to listen, that we may be renewed, connected, unburdened. Apprehend with wonder the lives of those around you, for from wonder into wonder, existence opens. Let us quiet ourselves in the spirit of prayer. Spirit of life, we gather here this morning, grateful for a place of centering. May this hour remind us that with all the busyness and fret and excitement and stress whirling around outside of us, there is a quiet stillness within us to which we can return. That with all the sadness and grief and loss we experience, there is also a small light of joy abiding deep within us, ready to rekindle the fire of our joyful living when it's time. That with all the practicalities and logistics of keeping up with our responsibilities, bills and insurance and to-do lists, there is also a reservoir of deep creativity, ready to be tapped in new and unexpected ways. That though our dear ones sometimes leave us and are no longer by our sides, there is a place inside us where they are kept close and present, ready to keep us company with their wisdom and love. May this hour remind us of this deep inner reserve we carry, this abundant well of spirit which never runs dry, but which is fed here with our praying, our singing, our stillness. Amen. Our reading this morning is by Barbara Road, entitled, "For My Friends Who Are Wounded." If I could, I would go to them and say it was only a dream. I would sit beside them and hold them in their dark and let their tears fall on the soft sleeves of my gown. I would kiss their hair. I would talk softly to them. I would tell them the secrets of fireflies and stars and the frost lace on the windows and the harvesting of corn. I would sing the grandfather's songs. I would bring small gifts in my hand, white spiraled shells and crimson leaves, smooth stones, a hyacinth, a peach. Then we would stand by the window, our arms around each other's waists. We would breathe in the cold night air. We would make promises and wait silently, still, listening for the bright, brave, astonishing light. Today, our nation celebrates Veterans Day, today and tomorrow. While Memorial Day gives us a public opportunity for remembering the men and women who died while serving our country, Veterans Day is a time for honoring all who have served and those who are still serving in our armed forces. Regardless of how we feel about war or particular wars, we must honor those who have served. This does not mean that we should be blind to the casualties of opposing forces or the tragic loss of civilian lives. This does not mean that we must docilely accept our leaders' reasoning for war. This does not mean that we should silence debate about acceptable tools of war or about who is recruited and why and how. It means that we must hold both our ambivalence about war and our love for our soldiers together in our same hearts. At the very least, we can hold both these things because we are asking our soldiers and veterans to carry so much more. In college, I remember reading The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. It's a collection of semi-autobiographical, interrelated short stories inspired by O'Brien's wartime experiences in Vietnam. The first chapter opens with these lines. First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross carried letters from a girl named Martha, a junior at Mount Sebastian College in New Jersey. They were not love letters, but Lieutenant Cross was hoping, so he kept them folded in plastic at the bottom of his rucksack. In the late afternoon, after a day's march, he would dig into his foxhole, wash his hands under a canteen, unwrap the letters, hold them with the tips of his fingers, and spend the last hour of light pretending. They were signed Love Martha, but Lieutenant Cross understood that love was only a way of signing and did not mean what he sometimes pretended it meant. At dusk, he would carefully return the letters to his rucksack. Slowly, a bit distracted, he would get up and move among his men, checking the perimeter. Then, at full dark, he would return to the hole and watch the night. When I think about Jimmy Cross carrying those letters from a girl named Martha, I think that he was carrying hope. Hope that maybe Martha's closing of Love Martha was more than just a way to end a letter. Hope that one day his life would return to the everyday cares of girls and relationships and first kisses. Jimmy let these small hopes stand in for the larger hope, which was heavier to carry. Hope that he would survive the war and get home alive. And hope is not the only thing that we ask our soldiers to carry. O'Brien writes, "The things they carried were largely determined by necessity. Among the necessities or near necessities were P38 can openers, pocket knives, heat tabs, wristwatches, dog tags, mosquito repellent, chewing gum, candy, cigarettes, salt tablets, packets of Kool-Aid, lighters, matches, sewing kits, military payment certificates, sea rations, and 2 or 3 canteens of water. Together, these items weighed between 15 and 20 pounds, depending on a man's habits or rate of metabolism. Henry Dobbins, who was a big man, carried extra rations. He was especially fond of canned peaches in heavy syrup over pound cake. Dave Jensen, who practiced field hygiene, carried a toothbrush, dental floss, and several hotel-sized bars of soap he'd stolen on R&R in Sydney, Australia. Ted Lavender, who was scared, carried tranquilizers until he was shot outside the village of Tonkay in mid-April. By necessity, and because it was standard operating procedure, they all carried steel helmets that weighed 5 pounds, including the liner and camouflage cover. They carried standard fatigue jackets and trousers. On their feet, they carried jungle boots, 2.1 pounds, and Dave Jensen carried 3 pairs of socks and a can of Dr. Scholl's foot powder as a precaution against trench foot. Until he was shot, Ted Lavender carried 6 or 7 ounces of premium dope, which for him was a necessity. Norman Bacher carried a diary. Rat Kiley carried comic books. Kiowa, a devout Baptist, carried an illustrated New Testament that had been presented to him by his father. I've always been haunted by this idea of the things they carried. I recently learned that this year, in 2012, the number of troops dying in battle has been eclipsed by the number of suicides among the nation's active duty military personnel. In fact, for every American soldier killed in combat this year, 25 will commit suicide. And although this was news to me, this is not new. Vietnam veteran advocates have estimated that suicide ultimately killed more of the soldiers who fought in that conflict than the actual war itself. And a study of Vietnam veterans 20 years later found that a quarter of those who served in Vietnam still had post-traumatic stress disorder. We have no idea the weight of the things they carry. In his story, Tim O'Brien skillfully works his way back and forth between the literal burden of physical weight and the invisible things they carry that cannot be weighed on a scale. The typical load of ammunition was 25 rounds, he says, but Ted Lavender, who was scared, carried 34 rounds when he was shot and killed outside Tang Khe. And he went down under an exceptional burden, more than 20 pounds of ammunition, plus the flak jacket and helmet and rations and water and toilet paper and tranquilizers and all the rest, plus the unweighed fear. He was dead weight. Forgive me for skipping around the story now. I'd love to read the whole book to you. But since I can't do that, I'll read you these lines found throughout the first chapter. Some carried CS or tear gas grenades. Some carried white phosphorus grenades. They all carried all they could bear, and then some, including a silent awe for the terrible power of the things they carried. They all carried ghosts. Some things they took turns carrying. They shared the weight of memory. They took up what others could no longer bear. Often they carried each other, the wounded or the weak. They carried all the emotional baggage of men who might die. Grief, terror, love, longing. These were intangibles. But the intangibles had their own mass and specific gravity. They had tangible weight. They carried shameful memories. They carried the common secret of cowardice barely restrained, the instinct to run or freeze and hide. And in many respects, this was the heaviest burden of all, for it could never be put down. It required perfect balance and perfect posture. These are my words now. My friend's younger brother, who served in Iraq, carries this memory. He was on patrol and came around a corner. He saw before him a small figure. In the 2 seconds that he had to make a judgment about how to react, he took in two things. The figure was a child, and the figure had a gun. He should have shot the child. At least that was what his training had taught him. But my friend's brother was a farm boy from the Midwest, not far from his own childhood years on the farm, playing cops and robbers with his cousins. And instead, he took some extra seconds to take in the scene more fully. If this had been a child soldier, my friend's brother would be dead. But it wasn't. It was an Iraqi boy playing with a toy gun that looked very real. And so the soldier's 2-second hesitation saved this boy's life. Using an interpreter, my friend's brother explained to the boy why he must not play with guns, real or pretend. He took the boy's toy gun away from him and also found out where he had bought it and went there and explained to the shopkeeper how he was going to get his young customers killed selling toy guns that looked like real guns in a war zone. There is so much to this story that is hard to tell and hard to think about. I think of the boy just playing there on his own street and how he could have lost his life for that. I think of the young soldier coming around the corner to find a gun pointed at him and having to decide whether to shoot a child. I'm devastated that this young man, who I know to be a sweet, caring, joyful young man, carried the responsibility for making these kinds of split-second decisions. That he carries this memory now, along with so many others, along with his physical battle scars. If I could, I would go to him and say it was only a dream. I am only grateful that this story did not go another way, because my friend's brother would have to carry that other story too for the rest of his life. We have no idea the weight of the things they carry. And you know what? We have no idea the weight of the things the person sitting next to us is carrying either. This is something to keep in mind. I was so keenly aware this week, as I was writing this sermon, that so many of you are carrying so much right now. Some of you might be veterans yourselves. I hope you'll tell me if you are. I know that some of you have children in the military, and that you are carrying pride and fear at the same time, and that you are carrying a great hope for your children's safety and for peace. Several of you have lost family members and close friends this week. Our hearts are with you as you carry this grief. I'm sure that in the poignancy of these days, you are carrying so many memories of your loved ones, both good and hard ones. I invite you to share those memories with me and with each other. We can hold them together. Many of you are carrying the tremendous weight of caring for members of your family who are ill. This is not an easy weight to carry. And I know there is some shame in focusing any spotlight on your own burden instead of that of your ill loved one. I invite you to talk about the weight of caregiving. There are more of us sharing this weight than you'd imagine, and we need to talk about it. We need to be gentle with ourselves. And once in a while, we need to put that weight down and care for ourselves. And some of you are the ones carrying the weight of illness yourselves and the disappointment of bodies. How do we tend to our souls when our containers are failing us? Perhaps in part by remembering that we are not our bodies. Perhaps in part by remembering that our bodies do hold us, and so we must take the best care we can with these fragile shells, even if that takes so much more energy than we want to devote to the task. We are each of us carrying burdens of memory, guilt, responsibility, fear. We carry our family histories and our failed relationships. We carry our grief for those we loved and who are gone from us. We carry our crippling shyness, our diagnoses, our debt, our worry. We carry the heft of that word waiting to be said, goodbye. My hope for us is that these are burdens we can help each other to hold. My hope is that under stress we can help each other to see our strengths, our inner light. Maybe we can't take away the weight of these very real things we each carry, but my hope is that we can help each other to find things to carry that sustain, heal, and comfort us as well. Martha, who did not necessarily love Jimmy Cross, but who signed her letters love, once sent Jimmy a beach pebble as a good luck charm. Smooth to the touch, it was milky white in color with flecks of orange and violet, oval-shaped like a miniature egg. On the march through the hot days of early April, he carried the pebble in his mouth, turning it with his tongue, tasting sea salt and moisture. His mind wandered. He had difficulty keeping his attention on the war. On occasion, he would yell at his men to spread out the column, to keep their eyes open, but then he would slip away into daydreams, just pretending, walking barefoot along the Jersey shore with Martha, carrying nothing. He would feel himself rising, sun and waves and gentle winds, all love and lightness. We are each of us carrying magic charms that make us feel safe, objects that help us feel connected to home, touchstones that remind us of better days or better selves, things that bring us back to center. We carry photos of children and grandchildren, sea glass found on a beach walk, songs in our head that make us smile, jewelry from loved ones, lines of poetry, a soft scarf wrapped around our neck. Do not despair that these small things sometimes feel like the only tether connecting us to peace. These small things hold great power. Do not despair that we need these things, these reminders, to comfort us as a child clings to a blanket. These are the sacred things we carry to counterbalance all those burdens that we carry also. Having survived the inhumanity of the Holocaust and the death of her husband, Miriam Elks told her son years later of two objects that sustained her. One was a piece of bread, which she always hid about her person. The other, a broken piece of comb. She kept the bread in case someone needed it more than she. And no matter what, morning and night, she would comb her hair to affirm her person. In the Book of Awakening, Mark Nepo writes what Miriam Elks carried and how she used what she carried is a profound example of how the Spirit can turn ordinary objects into living symbols that can help us live. He says, to carry the smallest crust of bread or truth that we can offer others always reminds us of two essential facts: that we do not live this life alone, and that no matter the severity of our own circumstance, we have something to give to others. The fact of this does not invalidate our pain, he says, but affirms our worth, that even in pain, we can be of value. On this Veterans Day, I lift up this truth. Generations of our veterans are in pain. Their families are in pain. We are in pain. And I lift up this truth. Among our burdens, we each carry great value, great strength, great dignity. And we carry small gifts in our hands, white spiraled shells and crimson leaves, smooth stones, a hyacinth, a peach. We can stand by the window, our arms around each other's waists. We can breathe in the cold night air. We can make promises and wait silently, still, listening together for the bright, brave, astonishing light. Amen. Blessed be.